My best friend stole my husband and they act like nothing happened. Imagine this. You've been best friends with someone for your entire life. You trust them completely, they're practically family. But then, one day, they betray you in the worst possible way. They steal your husband. You find out that your best friend, the one who knows all your secrets, the one who was there for you through thick and thin, has been having an affair with the person you thought you'd spend the rest of your life with. And even worse, they act like nothing happened. That's exactly what happened to OP. Her lifelong best friend betrayed her in a way she never saw coming. And now OP is left to pick up the pieces of her shattered marriage and her broken trust. The people who were supposed to love her the most were the ones who hurt her the deepest. This story is one of heartbreaking betrayal, but it's also a journey of strength and resilience. By the end of it, you'll be asking yourself, how could they act like nothing happened? Let's dive in. OP and her best friend, we'll call her Sarah, have known each other for as long as they can remember. They met when they were just kids, and their friendship grew into something that felt more like family. They did everything together, from school projects to sleepovers, and later when they became adults, they celebrated life's biggest milestones together. Sarah was more than just a friend to OP. She was a sister, a confidant, and someone OP could always count on. They supported each other through breakups, job changes, family drama, everything. When OP got married, it was only natural that Sarah would be by her side, not just as a bridesmaid, but as her maid of honor. After all, Sarah had been there for OP through thick and thin. Let's talk about OP's husband. We'll call him Tom. Tom and OP met in their mid-20s and fell in love fast. Their relationship was like something out of a fairy tale. They traveled together, shared dreams of starting a family, and seemed like the perfect couple. OP loved Tom deeply, and for the first few years of their marriage, everything felt picture perfect. Tom and Sarah got along great, which made sense to OP. After all, Sarah was a huge part of OP's life, and having her husband and best friend get along was the best of both worlds. They would all hang out together, weekend barbecues, dinners, game nights. It was fun, it was easy, and OP never suspected a thing. For OP, life was good. She had her best friend and her husband by her side, and she couldn't imagine anything going wrong. She trusted them both completely. Never in a million years would she have thought that her two most important relationships could turn into her greatest betrayal. But then, slowly, things started to change. OP began to notice little things that felt off. At first, they were subtle, almost unnoticeable. Sarah and Tom would laugh a little too long at each other's jokes. When they were all together, there was a strange tension that OP couldn't quite put her finger on. They seemed almost too comfortable with each other. OP brushed it off at first. After all, they were her husband and her best friend. They were bound to get along well, right? But as time went on, the signs became harder to ignore. Sarah started showing up at OP's house when Tom was home and OP wasn't. Tom started mentioning Sarah more often in casual conversation. How she was doing, what she thought about certain things, how she gave him advice on something. OP started getting that gut feeling, the one you try to ignore because it's too uncomfortable to face. But the more she tried to dismiss it, the more the signs piled up. Sarah would text Tom late at night, and when OP would ask about it, Tom would shrug it off, saying, "We're just talking about work stuff," or "Sarah needed some advice on something." OP wanted to trust them. After all, these were the two people she trusted most in the world. But deep down, something felt wrong. She started feeling like the third wheel in her own marriage. Sarah and Tom had inside jokes, they shared knowing glances, and when they were together, it sometimes felt like OP was the outsider. But even then, OP tried to convince herself that it was all in her head. She loved them both so much, and the thought of something happening between them seemed impossible. She pushed her feelings aside and kept telling herself that everything was fine, that Sarah would never betray her, and Tom would never cheat. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something wasn't right, but you ignored it because it was too painful to face? Looking back, OP wishes she had trusted her instincts earlier. But at the time, it felt easier to believe that nothing was wrong. Then came the day when everything fell apart. OP had left work early one afternoon. She had a surprise planned for Tom, thinking they could spend some quality time together. But when she got home, she found something she never could have prepared for. As she opened the front door, she heard voices coming from the living room. And not just any voices, Sarah's and Tom's. OP's heart raced, but she told herself it was probably nothing. Maybe Sarah had just stopped by. Maybe they were just hanging out. But as she walked closer to the living room, she saw it. Tom and Sarah were sitting too close, closer than friends should sit. They weren't just chatting, they were holding hands. OP felt the world drop out from beneath her. The air in the room became thick, suffocating. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. The two people she trusted most were betraying her in front of her own eyes. When they noticed her, there was this awkward silence. Neither of them jumped up to explain. They just stared at her like deer caught in headlights. OP stood there frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. She wanted to scream, cry, throw something, anything to break the silence. But all she could manage was a choked, "What is going on?" Tom and Sarah didn't have an explanation. Instead of showing remorse or guilt, they acted like it wasn't a big deal. Sarah, her best friend, shrugged and said, "We didn't mean for it to happen." And Tom, OP's husband, said, "It just happened. We didn't want to hurt you." The casual way they brushed off what they had done made OP's heart shatter into a million pieces. They weren't apologetic. They weren't even trying to explain how it had started. They were just sitting there, acting like OP was overreacting, like she should understand and accept it. OP felt like her world was crumbling around her. Her marriage, her friendship, her life as she knew it, it was all falling apart. The people she loved most had betrayed her, and they didn't even seem to care. How was she supposed to move on from this? How was she supposed to process this level of betrayal? Have you ever been in a situation where the people you trusted most broke your heart, and they acted like nothing had happened? It's a kind of pain that cuts deeper than anything else. But after the shock of that day, OP didn't know what to do next. She felt like she was living in a nightmare, except she couldn't wake up from it. Tom and Sarah tried to downplay their actions, acting as if OP should just accept that their relationship had changed. They kept insisting that they hadn't meant for it to happen, but OP couldn't wrap her mind around how casual they were being about it. The days following the revelation were some of the hardest of OP's life. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Tom and Sarah together. The image of them sitting there, holding hands, kept replaying in her mind like a broken record. OP's world was in ruins. Her trust was shattered, and she didn't know how to move forward. The marriage she thought was built on love and loyalty had been built on lies. The friendship she thought was unbreakable had been destroyed in the most painful way possible. And the worst part? Tom and Sarah were acting like nothing had changed. They were still seeing each other, still going about their lives like they hadn't just torn OP's heart out. How do you cope when the people who betray you refuse to acknowledge the damage they've done? OP was left alone to pick up the pieces of her life, while Tom and Sarah carried on as if they were the victims. OP felt completely lost. She was angry, heartbroken, and humiliated. Every time she tried to talk to Tom about what had happened, he would shrug it off, saying things like, "I didn't plan this. It just happened." But for OP, that wasn't enough. She needed answers. She needed closure. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt completely betrayed, but the people responsible acted like it wasn't a big deal? How do you even begin to heal from that kind of emotional devastation? After weeks of trying to make sense of what had happened, OP realized that she needed closure. She couldn't keep living in this limbo of betrayal and silence. So she decided to confront Tom and Sarah one last time. She needed answers, and she needed them to acknowledge the pain they had caused. She sat them down and asked the questions she had been avoiding. How long had the affair been going on? Why hadn't they told her sooner? Did they feel any guilt for what they had done? Their answers were vague, unsatisfying. They both insisted that they hadn't planned to hurt her, that their relationship had just evolved. They claimed they didn't want to hurt her, but their actions said otherwise. OP realized that they weren't going to give her the closure she needed. They were too wrapped up in each other to care about the destruction they had caused. It was in that moment that OP realized she wasn't going to get the apology or the explanation she deserved. She had been holding on to the hope that they would show some kind of remorse, that they would understand the depth of their betrayal. But that wasn't going to happen. OP knew that the only way she could move forward was by letting go, not just of Tom and Sarah, but of the need for them to validate her pain. They weren't going to fix what they had broken, and she couldn't keep waiting for them to make things right. OP made the decision to walk away from both of them. She filed for divorce, cut Sarah out of her life completely, and started the long journey of healing. It wasn't easy. Letting go of people who had been such a huge part of her life felt like tearing out a piece of herself. But OP knew that she deserved better. She deserved a life where she wasn't constantly reminded of betrayal. OP's healing process wasn't immediate. It took months of therapy, tears, and rebuilding her sense of self. She had to relearn how to trust not just others, but herself. The betrayal had shaken her to her core, but slowly, she started to regain her strength. As time went on, OP realized that walking away from Tom and Sarah was the best decision she could have made. She had always thought that their presence in her life was essential, but she learned that she could be strong on her own. She didn't need people who would betray her trust and break her heart. OP found new hobbies, reconnected with old friends, and eventually started dating again. But this time she was more cautious. She had learned the hard way that not everyone you love will love you back in the same way. And that's okay because it made OP stronger. The betrayal that once shattered her had become a part of her story, but it didn't define her. OP learned that while betrayal is painful, it's also an opportunity for growth. She became more resilient, more self-assured, and more protective of her heart. The journey wasn't easy, but OP found peace in the end. She let go of the past and the people who had hurt her, and she focused on building a future where she could truly be happy. So what do you think? Was OP right to walk away from her husband and her best friend after such a betrayal? Or should she have tried to forgive them and work things out? Betrayal is one of the hardest things to overcome. But sometimes it's the only way to protect yourself and move forward. I'd love to hear what you think. Have you ever experienced a betrayal like OP's? How did you handle it? And do you think OP made the right choice by cutting them out of her life? Let me know in the comments below. OP was absolutely right to walk away. There's no coming back from that level of betrayal. Her husband and her best friend? That's just unforgivable. It's one thing to make a mistake, but the way they downplayed it like it wasn't a big deal, that's the worst part. OP deserved better than both of them. I'm so glad she found the strength to move on, because no one should stay in a situation like that. Exactly. It wasn't just the affair. It was their attitude afterward that made it so much worse. They didn't even care about how much they hurt her. OP was right to cut them out of her life for good. Totally agree. The fact that they acted like OP was overreacting is just mind-blowing. It's one thing to mess up, but to act like it's no big deal? That's a whole other level of cruelty. OP did the right thing by walking away. The betrayal from both sides must have been soul-crushing. OP wasn't just betrayed by her husband, but by her best friend of so many years. That's two of the closest people in her life betraying her trust at the same time. I can't imagine the emotional devastation. They both knew how much they meant to her, and they still went behind her back. That's unforgivable. And honestly, OP deserves all the peace and happiness she's finding now. Yeah, I can't even imagine how painful that must have been. Losing your spouse is hard enough, but your best friend too? It's like her whole support system fell apart. It's amazing she was able to move on from that. Exactly. Betrayal from a friend hurts just as much as from a partner. She must have felt so alone. But I'm glad she found a way to rebuild her life. Some people never get past that kind of hurt. They had zero remorse. OP deserves way better. The fact that neither of them showed any real remorse is the biggest red flag. It's almost like they expected OP to just get over it and accept their relationship. How can you trust people like that? I'm proud of OP for realizing she deserved more and cutting them out of her life, even though it must have been incredibly hard. Exactly. They were so casual about it, like OP should have just accepted it. That level of disrespect is shocking. She 100% made the right call by walking away and focusing on herself. I know, right? It's one thing to make a mistake, but not even feeling guilty about it. OP deserved so much better than their gaslighting and lack of empathy. She's so strong for choosing herself in the end. The gut feeling, always trust it. When OP talked about having that gut feeling but brushing it off, I felt that. So many people ignore their instincts because they don't want to believe something bad is happening. Her intuition was spot on, and it's sad that she had to experience such a betrayal to realize it. Always trust your gut, because it rarely lies. So true. Your gut feeling is usually your brain picking up on subtle things that your heart doesn't want to acknowledge. It's heartbreaking that OP had to go through this, but it's a reminder to trust your instincts no matter how hard it is. Yes, ignoring your gut can lead to so much unnecessary pain. I wish OP had trusted herself sooner, but at least she eventually saw the truth and took action. It's a tough lesson, but an important one. OP's journey of healing is inspiring. The fact that OP was able to rebuild her life after such a massive betrayal is honestly inspiring. She could have let this define her and stay stuck in the pain, but instead, she chose to move forward and focus on herself. That takes so much strength. Her story shows that you can find happiness again, even after the worst kind of heartbreak. Absolutely! It's easy to get stuck in the pain, but OP's resilience shows that healing is possible. She didn't just survive this, she thrived. Her story is a testament to the power of self-love and strength. Exactly. It's so empowering to see someone take control of their own narrative after such a betrayal. OP's journey reminds us that we don't have to let the worst moments in life define us forever. And if you found this story as heartbreaking and powerful as I did, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell for more stories like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.